Welcome back to Ascend Legal 101. Today we have the privilege of speaking to Bill Yearwood. Bill started his flying career flying fixed wing on a sugar plantation in South America and moved to rotary wing in helilogging, firefighting, medevac, and offshore exploration. After losing more friends than he'd like to count to aviation accidents, he refocused his passion and commitment to safety as an inspector with Transport Canada Civil Aviation, and then as manager of aviation accident investigations with the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, until his retirement in 2019. In 2018, he was celebrated as the winner of the Lieutenant Governor Safety Awards Lifetime Achievement Award. Bill continues to fly. He cycles like a demon, and now, with his new book, Getting It, Learning from Aviation Accident Investigation, he shares his understanding of accidents to help reduce the risk of reoccurrence. In his own words, sharing knowledge of hazards is like marking mines in a field. Please help me welcome Bill Yearwood. Welcome back to Ascend Legal 101. I'm Ramona, and today I am honored to be with Bill Yearwood, who's a retired Transportation Safety Board investigator, and he's just written a new book, and I'm about to scare him with the state of my book, but first I'd like to welcome you, Bill.
I'm happy to be here and good to meet you.
Thank you. So I did read this book more than once, and at one time these were color-coded, and now there's just so many that I've had to redo my flags so I can get to the important bits. So your new book is called Getting It, Learning from Aviation Accident Investigations. And I'm wondering first if you can tell me a little bit about your background, and then why you wanted to write this book.
Well, I grew up on a little sugar estate in South America and happened to get the opportunity to control a light airplane at 13, which got me hooked. And I learned to fly and airplanes and went into I liked the idea of bush flying. So got float plane endorsement and then hopped into helicopters, which turned out to be quite an enjoyable challenge. So I ended up north and in the jungles of South America. And over the years, I was losing a lot of friends, about 5 a year. And whilst I was there with them, I was just sort of glad that it wasn't me. And then at some point, I stepped out and went car racing for a while. And then that hit me that my friends were still vulnerable, and got back into flying with the Exxon Valdez and came around to logging again, and it was still the same. So I joined Transport Canada and became an inspector with, at that time, called Commercial and Business Aviation. So I was doing check rides, etc., and trying to make it more like the industry was, sort of recognize what I came from and see if I could gain some respect from the industry as an industry professional. And that worked somewhat, but then an opportunity came to join the safety board. And I had been helping friends, widows in investigations already. And when I was car racing. So it was a natural step into accident investigations. And I quickly learned, I dove in head first in investigations. I went to interviews, examinations of wreckage. I went to funerals. I went in head first and wrote, 15 of the 31 investigation reports that first or second year. And realized that some of the things I learned in the industry was very helpful, and I was learning a lot from these investigations, and realized there's a lot of people out there that don't understand the risk and the traps. So I did a lot of briefings. I invited flying schools, groups, companies, went to companies and did briefings of what was going on. Interesting accidents, interesting findings. I used to start by saying, I'm here to instill a healthy level of fear, but I still fly and it's still a good thing to a good career. And when I retired, not having so much opportunity to do those briefings, the book was a natural. It was kind of, and you might have found that it's kind of like a briefing, you know, and I learned to relate to the industry by sharing that I was as human as they were, and I was capable and have made lots of errors. And that seemed to touch and get through. When we stand up as so-called authorities without any, or without showing our underbelly, we don't connect well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I was trying to do throughout my career in government and with this book.
Well, this book, you start off with really, quite literally, what could have been a bomb. And I have to say that while I was reading it, for about the first 70 pages, probably 79, because 79, I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but 79 is gut-wrenching, the whole page. But for about the first, 70 pages, I think I was in fight or flight like the whole time, because I'm making notes, and I was really, my brain was really active as I was the first go through, and I thought, wow, you've done a really good job with this book. But in the first chapter, even the first story that you write, I was thinking, oh, good job. That's, again, I don't want to give away too much in the book, but you feel as if, oh, problem solved. And then you write this sentence: I brought a ticking time bomb into town, not an acceptable risk. And I thought, boom, well, here we go. And the whole book is really illustrated, not just of your career, and you've done all those cowboy things, and not just of your career, but really about your commitment to safety. And can you tell me a little bit first about your relationships with the families of accident victims, because you do touch on it here. I mean, I'm sure you probably have a lot more to tell without breaking confidence, but that's one of the things that I sort of most appreciated about you.
Well, the thing is that I started into accident investigation because of losing a good friend and helping his widow, and trying to find out, well, first find counsel for her, and then trying to help that counsel understand what happened and what was out there, and the weaknesses in the system, or the traps, as I call them, that pilots, AMEs, managers, everybody involved is exposed to, because I keep reminding people, these are accidents, and regardless of where they start, it's a human that didn't intend it to happen. So, spending time with the families is always difficult, but having started where I did with a friend's widow, it was a must. I have to do this, and I have to share my commitment to helping them understand what happened. Sadly, their sorrow, sadly, but one must understand that when you take on that, you take on a little bit their sorrow too. And the only way to get that off your back is to do something that changes the risk, reduces the risk. And I put these ideas, recommendations, suggested changes in this big hopper of whether it's directly to the manufacturer, to the insurance underwriters. And I can tell you a little bit about how that works really well. And you don't know when it's going to come out, but it does. And I saw in one case, I was flying with a test pilot at the manufacturer, and I asked them about one of their new aircraft that they were having a little trouble getting certified. And he told me what was happening. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, I caused that 20 years ago. I caused them to stop and look and make sure that this is done right. It took 20 years, but it happened. And you just have to keep putting those flags up in that big hopper of information for people, and hope change comes as soon as possible.
Well, you illustrate that change in the book as well when you talk about the two very, very similar helicopter crashes, and one where 3 people died, and the other one, they had made significant changes to the infrastructure inside the helicopter and push out windows and different things. And I mean, that really saved the lives of the people who had the almost identical crash.
Absolutely. And that's credit to the investigation of the first accident. I was party to advise in the coroner's inquest, and saw the safety board make recommendations that were the manufacturer. There weren't any changes in regulations as such, but the manufacturers stepped in and fixed the problems. The operators fixed the problems. There were, new designs that were approved, and that was great. Sadly, I do find some cases where the manufacturers are reluctant to make changes. And that's when I have the opportunity, having had the ear of one of the Lloyd Syndicate risk managers, who came to my office and said, we want to insure this helicopter, and we're the last company that's considering it. And what can we do to reduce our risk? And wow. I said, make sure the skin on the tail boom's changed every 10,000 hours. And they ran off and made it a requirement, if you want to insure your helicopter, that skin has to be changed to 5,000 hours. A little bit overkill, but it happened immediately because nobody else was going to insure that helicopter. And so that's one of the curves that I got an opportunity to use, and I used every window curve opportunity, whatever it is that I could facilitate change that could save lives, and sometimes to the annoyance of my bosses in Ottawa, but in the end I got kudos for helping safety.
Well, and I want to ask you about that, if you don't mind. The difference between, so we see how quickly action is taken in private industry if it's necessary. So if the insurance company says, oh, we'll only insure it if you do this, so private industry will go ahead and do that. How did you find the government, so say Transport Canada, or I guess not Transportation Safety Board, but how quickly did Transport Canada act on suggestions?
Yeah, Transport Canada, I have to say, acting on the Transportation Safety Board's recommendations is painfully slow. And to understand that a little bit, the Transportation Safety Board is pretty much and the coroner service, or the provincial coroner service, are pretty much the only lobbyists for those changes. Whereas the commercial industry is more likely to lobby against the change or not support it readily. I've seen some long delays. I've seen manufacturers deny for a long time until lawsuits are resolved, which are at least 7 years. I shouldn't say at least, but often as much as 7 years. But I must say, recently I've seen a positive change, and I think it's comes out of Boeing's experience with their accidents with the 737 MAX. And we had a tragic helicopter accident earlier this year that the manufacturer jumped in quite early. I helped put some pressure, but the operator pressured, and the manufacturer stepped up within 2 weeks and said, "We've got a problem, and here is the fix." And beautiful, I mean, there was still a couple of weeks of pilots flying around wondering if it was going to happen to them, but that was good, and I hope, of all the bad that came out of, and the suffering that people have had, and the huge financial losses and that Boeing suffer from those accidents, have a positive, is positive to the industry by reducing risk early. And that's, we know that you can't predict everything, but when something happens, you don't need to guess anymore. Just get it fixed.
Right. Well, you do have one line in your book. I have to quickly open it. Again, it's at the beginning. I thought it was really striking when you said, if nothing went wrong, were the risks managed? And, after an accident, it's so easy for us to go, oh, I don't want to say it's easy. That's incorrect, sort of. But, we can say, oh, this happened, or it's this person's fault, or this person made a mistake, or it was an error in judgment. But sometimes you think you are mitigating the risk, and you create more risk.
Well, you naively move into a risky area, and we humans get quite comfortable walking on the edge. As we get through high risk situations, we get more comfortable with it. And that's when we relax and we think, oh, everything's going good. And one of the biggest things that I've seen that reduces accidents is an accident.
Of course.
When, we go along and we think that everything is good, and the whole industry gets complacent. And then there is a bad accident, and everybody sits up and pays attention. And we see a cycle of that. Thankfully, that wave of no accidents, a few accidents, no accidents, a few accidents, is stepping down, at least in the Western world, mostly due to technology. We've got more robust aircraft and systems. We've got, additional to that, good training. Training's got better, and we're breeding more professional pilots. Was I enjoyed the years of I don't know, used to call it the Marlboro Man, it's which kind of cowboy, and we kind of tuned up the gene pool, the smart, skilled, and lucky survived, and the others failed. And I made a comment once that was hard to or not expected from me, because I did say once that in a sort of after meeting joke, safety is not all what is cracked up to be, and that it's an attack on the gene pool. But I have to say that, and another thing with that too is, when I got into working in a job that had safety in my title or thing like that, my wife said, they got the wrong guy, And I have to say that being exposed to risk and managing it is what safety is about, you know. Or I shouldn't say being exposed to it, but identifying risk and managing it. We could all stay at home and we might not expose ourselves to risk on the road, but we'll expose ourselves to risk of many other things that become bonus chickens, really. And so I use that, because when people say, "Oh, you race bicycles and used to race cars and you flew helicopter logging and everything else, how could you say you're in the safety business?" And I know that I'm still vulnerable, but I like to think that I weigh the odds with the knowledge that I have, and try and reduce the risk by playing out what I'm doing in advance in my mind. Just kind of say, okay, well, if this happened, am I wearing the proper clothes or shoes? Or as simple as that, you know. When I go flying, I think about whether I could be stuck out. It's an accident. Am I wearing good clothing for the risk of fire? All of those things still come up, and I hope people that work in a business that could be high risk reduce the risk, because first you reduce the probability of an accident, and then if you can, when you get to as low as possible with that, you have to reduce the severity of an accident. And it's all about probability and severity. And I wear a helmet when I go flying. I wear a helmet when I ride my bicycle.
Smart. Yeah, I used to work with somebody in law who said he every day he would say, well, the 5 P's, proper preparation prevents poor performance. And I'd be like, yeah. Well, once I started flying, I was like, the 5 P's. I think because you realize sometimes that your perfectionism perhaps can, get in your way. But also, I felt like I really needed to be prepared. I never thought about what I was wearing until I started flying. I know, and so those 5 P's are really important. I actually wanted to ask you, while I was going through the book, while I was reading it, I was having those little conversations in my head where I was like, yeah, and another thing, gee, too bad so-and-so didn't read this book. I'm going to send him a copy, So I had a lot of those kind of things in my head, which is why I had to read it twice. So let's talk about safety culture generally, because I think, you talk about helicopter logging. Well, my first exposure to helicopter logging was doing an estate in a law firm of more than one person who died in a helicopter logging accident. And then I think I can't remember how many years later, probably 5-ish years later, I had exposure to the same helicopter logging accident, only in a different piece of litigation, different plaintiffs. Mm-hmm. So, it was different aspects of the same accident. And perhaps because I get a view of that side of things, that it just doesn't end with an accident. And somebody's life actually doesn't end with that accident. There's so much that is a fallout, and then we run into the people who just, I don't know if it's, just being overconfident or lazy, or I don't think it's laziness, but you know what I mean? Like there's just an attitude of, it'll be fine, so it's a little bit complacent, and then, they haven't seen that play out.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, and that goes back to the complacency from things working, and when somebody makes a good decision to not do something because they think it's risky, there's no confirmation that it couldn't have been done. And there is somebody in the background that will say, oh, we could have done that, it wasn't that bad. And the only time you get the confirmation is when you do it and it fails. And we've seen some of those. And I've seen a case where a pilot, several of them going out on a job, and one says, I'm not going to weather, it's too bad. And the chief pilot comes in and takes over. And they go out and there is a fatal accident.
Mm.
Well, that person that stepped back and said, I'm not doing this, that was hard. That was very difficult for them to do, I'm sure. And I'm sure they felt they were going to be blackballed. But it was the best decision. And you know, kudos to that person. They were the ones that made the smart. He was the one that made the smart decision. And we get pushed. I mean, you look at the space shuttle with the school teacher, and the first time that happened, you know, the people in the background, the scientists, maintenance people, the people who understood a weakness in the system said, no, you know, it's too cold. But there was so much momentum to launch that rocket and shuttle that it went ahead. And you know, that's one of the iconic examples of momentum blowing up in your face. And how hard it is to stop. I call it operational momentum.
Right.
And that's a culture that we have to always remind ourselves that anybody should be able to put their hand up and say, this doesn't feel comfortable. And I'm not comfortable with this. I can a quick little story with logging. We flew 2 captains and switched seats every hour, and pilots in a co-pilot seat are scared, you know, and we got stuck in the fog on the side of the hill, and, you know, it was pretty bad. And then we finally came down the hill, and my colleague started heading back up the hill into the fog. And I just pulled back one engine, the one on my side. He says, what's going on? And I said, this side of the helicopter is not comfortable in going back up that hill. Oh, I didn't know you felt that way. And we went back down and sat out the weather. But it got his attention because he was looking out, and all of a sudden an engine spooled down. Right. And but the fog wasn't scaring him as much as it was me, because I wasn't flying that cycle. So we have to give everybody the opportunity to speak up and impact the culture that is inclined to get rolled up in operational momentum.
Right.
I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. You know, I was actually, I think you answered my next one too, because I was going to say, what do we do if we're in that situation? We just have to be brave enough to speak up. I guess that's the answer.
Absolutely. You know, and we sometimes have to do something that draws attention, as opposed to a little murmur that comes across as, oh, he's just whining again, you know. So, and we have to take a stand and be willing to you know, say, well, you know, if they don't like it, I can't be part of this.
Right.
You know, and we, you know, I think I put a little bit in the book about safety management with regard to leading executives and owners, where it's very difficult for somebody that owns a company or responsible for a company's success to admit that they're not doing a good job or messing up, and share that information of what went wrong that they just got away with by the skin of their teeth. So a good system takes care of that. A good leader will make it so that it's automatic when they have a problem, that it gets reported, and it doesn't have to be their decision to report it. It's automatic. And reporting is, as I say, identifying the mines in the minefield that we live in or operate in, and that's the key. It's communications. If you're all alone, you're a one-man operator. You know what you're doing, but do you know what other people are doing and learning from? And we owe it to them to share the things that we got tripped up on.
I know this is your book, but I'm going to make it about me again for a minute. And that is that exactly when you touched on that in the book, it reminded me of an experience that I had that was really illustrative of a culture that was perhaps not balanced. And thankfully, it was sort of, we caught things in an audit, an independent audit, as opposed to an accident. And it was, as accountable executive, of course, it was, you know, when you're the accountable executive, it in my opinion, leadership, you know, you set the tone, you walk the walk. That's how I view leadership. And I know everybody is not the same. But one of the audit findings was against me personally. This is like full disclosure, because I trusted the staff too much. Because I am not an aircraft maintenance engineer or career pilot, or, you know, that kind of thing. That wasn't my first game. And so I trusted the professionals. In law, you know, we all have our piece. This is what we do. I don't tell that lawyer what to do or say in court. He doesn't tell me what my piece of my job is, but I make sure that when he goes to court, he's got all the evidence he needs and he can connect the dots, and he does that. Right? So I went in with this mentality. And so I didn't question a lot of things. And of course, after that finding and after that sort of self-reflection and realization on my part, I started to question things. That doesn't make you very popular. Like, I was not a favorite. But, you know, I needed to have a greater level of understanding. Here's what we say we do. How do we really do it? You know, and let's have our business reflective of, you know, a sort of, let's have our business in integrity.
Yes, and you know, I use the safety board, the Transportation Safety Board's mandate and the act and the regulations as an example. They have a really good mandate. The act is well done, executed, and the regulations suit them all. There's always a little things here and there that one can tweak, but they have a very good framework. And when I question anything that the safety board does, it's actually the administration of what is actually really good. And they've done excellent work, but sometimes I see a move in the administration that is closed in. When I first got there, it seemed like, okay, everybody just gets all this stuff and goes into a back corner in the dark of the rest of the world. And a year or two later comes out with this report and what they figured out. And I don't think that's what is meant to be. I think it's important that we are a team with the industry that's had the accident and not had the accident to find out what's going on, share information, and make corrections early. You know, I've had professionals that were outside of the board that were part of the team that picked up on really important findings and took us in the right direction. Or in one case, we were stymied by the manufacturer's reluctance to give us the correct information. And we wrote a report that was not correct. It didn't get to the point correctly. And then a law firm that was involved in the accident said, you might want to go and look at the documents that have just been filed. And we looked at them and found that there was documents that we had been given had been altered. and
Oh,
sent us down the wrong path. And so, I look at that and says, if I wasn't open and friendly with all of the people involved, then we wouldn't have learned that, and I might not have had the opportunity to correct the findings. So, I go back to saying it's great, but the administration can and should look at the opportunity to get information out fast, share information, so that smart people that are outside of the board get an opportunity to draw opinions. And it might not be a big change, but it's good for their company. The board the board doesn't make recommendations on some of the small findings we have. We just report them, but it's years later. When it's a big deal, they do take the opportunity to do interim recommendations and get information out early. But that's when something is really big. We miss the opportunity for the operator and the manufacturer sometimes to say, okay, and I shouldn't say the manufacturer, because they're usually involved in the investigation, but and this new thing with Boeing, they're stepping up. But operators, they operate the same kind of aircraft. They might not have had the opportunity to get good information on how that accident evolved. And if we could give them that, they can say, oh, geez, we do that too. We better change this.
right.
And that's sorry if I went off.
No, that's important.
I think the board has a great mandate, and the Act supports them well. Just sometimes the administration slows things down or leaves things out that frustrates me.
Right. So you and I sort of had an offline conversation about evidence. Can I ask you a couple of questions about that? Just or one anyway, just because my mind sort of went, what? I had that little implosion sort of as a legal person. If the Transportation Safety Board makes a finding, so you've done your investigation, you've looked at all the evidence that has been presented, because I know sometimes stuff comes out later, but you look at all the evidence, you create your report, you make your finding. First off, can you tell me the three levels of finding, or the different levels of findings you can make?
Yeah, well, the board wants to find the cause, and so the first level of finding is what caused the accident, and it can be a chain of events, and you can have several findings that cause the accident, and if you remove any one of them, the accident doesn't happen. And then there's the findings as to risk. So whilst we're investigating, or whilst we were investigating, and for my case, I'm not doing it anymore, you look at what are the things that could have caused an accident or cause other problems, and you report on those. And then there's what we call other findings, that we just found this, and it's important to document. And one of the things that I like about the board's active position thing is because it doesn't find fault, the board does not have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt in their report. They can write that this is possible, this is probable, this is likely, or we concluded that this happened. And those are all important. Even if they miss it a little bit. In other words, if you say that this is possible, somebody can fix what is possible that caused the accident, that has probable, etc. And so the being too conservative with findings when they don't have proof beyond the shadow of a doubt, and they come out with a finding that says, really don't know what happened, I think is not sharing enough, because investigators and analysts have got at least halfway and have said, we think this is what happened because it's possible, or we think this is what happened because, I've seen this happen several times. I can't prove it. So I think that needs to be written and not be scared or too conservative to say that we have an idea of what happened. So I was always looked at badly for jumping up now and again and saying, why is safety a secret at the TSB?
Yeah.
And that is people take stock in that, so it's all about sharing information, because that's what safety is about, identifying the risk. And when you're the custodian of all the information on this tragic event and you come up with your opinion as to what happened, that's great. And the board does hit it on the nail a lot of the times. But all of that information needs to be available for the supporting information, or all the information, not just the supporting information, because that's in the board's opinion. So they keep the information that supports their opinion. But we have to make sure that the information that is being gathered that may not have seemed important to all the team in the investigation is still available, because sometimes the findings are limited by the resources to go deeper. And you can't go deeper if the initial data is not available. So I see the board as being the custodians of the information, have a responsibility to keep it, never destroy it, and make sure that it's available, whether it supports their findings or not.
Right. Well, I wondered what happens to that, because what if there's a piece of litigation? What if there's, I don't know if the RCMP ever gets involved after the fact. Perhaps if you find some sort of criminal negligence, then you partner with the RCMP. But what if there's an appeal? What if there's a, further?
Yeah, the board and the board's employees are not compellable to any court other than a coroner's inquest. Mm-hmm. There has been occasions where counsel has been able to prove that an investigator is or somebody in the board is the only source of the information, and they are compelled. But the Act deems the investigators as incompetent witnesses. And that is good. It protects them to not have to worry about civil litigation, because they are not to try and find fault, but just to find the cause. But somebody else might be in there trying to find fault. And that information, the RCMP gathers information usually for us as we start the investigation, and then they hand it over to us. And they're happy to pass that on. Once they determine that this was an accident and not criminal intent, they hand it over to us. In cases like Swiss Air, where it was not clear for pretty much the whole investigation if there was criminal intent. So the RCMP set up their own detachment with the investigation, worked side by side with the TSB, and were poised that any time that we found something, or they found something that took it over to the criminal side, as opposed to the accident side, they would lead the investigation. We lead when it's an accident, or we did lead. It's an accident, TSB leads as an accident. But at any time the RCMP finds that this is criminal, then they take over. And Air India is an example of that. So we work closely with the coroner service, because they have a similar mandate. They are charged with finding the cause of death, and the TSB was charged with finding the cause of the accident. and they're related. Either the death caused the accident or the accident caused the death.
Right.
So we work closely with them, and we were compellable to their inquests in a court like that, because it was not to find fault, but to find reasons and make recommendations.
And one of my last questions, I don't want to take up all your time, but quite frankly, I could talk to you all day. You frequently use magicians as an example in your book, which I thought was brilliant. Can you sort of expand on that? Again, I don't want to sort of take it, I don't want to any spoilers.
Yeah, well, magicians and comedians are the best human factor people. You know, comedians study, they recognize human error, and they make us laugh at the stupid things we do. And magicians take advantage of the failings of a human's ability to observe or be distracted, and hence not observe what's going on. And it's impressive to see how a magician can fool people over and over again. And I went to a small show at UBC once, and then I thought it was well done, and I asked the magician if he used his knowledge of how people are distracted and how the limitations to their eyesight works to reduce risk in his life. And he looked at me a little bit stunned and says, "No, I just use it for my show." And I thought that was a loss. You know, if magicians could all if we found out that they were using this to reduce their risk of having accidents and taught people how to do that, that would be great. You know, so, but you look at the far side, you look at so many things where comedians just show us how we make the same errors over and over. You know, technology is helping that, even with just it's not perfect, but even with our spelling, etc. And in aviation, technology will take over and fly the aircraft. Elevators are going without drivers, and trains are going without drivers. Aircraft can easier than cars, and cars are coming. Not to say they won't make errors, they will. But they will leave a track of where the error was made. And when fixed, when you flip the switch, it says, don't turn right, turn left at this junction, it won't happen again. We humans make errors over and over again, the same errors, and that's why magicians can do it or fool us. And I don't know, software may mature every 6 months, but humans take 600 years plus to evolve. So I'm not scared of automation in transportation, and you know, FedEx and UPS will be sending boxes around the world without pilots for a while before we realize, hey, the boxes are getting there and we're not. I'm going to get in a box. So and then there'll be some acceptance to a computer taking us from A to B.
Remember when people used to freak out if there was a woman flying in the airplane?
Yeah. Oh, geez, yeah.
What are they going to do when it's a computer?
Right. Well, you know, it's, you know, having said what I said about being part of the Cowboys and Marlboro Man part, it was easy for me to say that, you know, women being mothers and looking after the world had to have a less tolerance for risk. And we see that, I've been on the board for cycling, we see that in the cycling world in the UK. And we see that there's only 15% of the cyclists in the city core are women. And in Holland, they're 52% or something like that. And until we can get women to do an equal amount of what their demographics are, if it's 52% women, they should be 52% of them cycling. We know that the risk is not acceptable because women have a lower tolerance to taking a risk and to men. So I say that's a good measure, and we're seeing more women in aviation. So I think we're getting a little closer.
Right. I was in a human factors course once, and the man said to me, "Ramona, isn't it true that women are wired for fear and men are motivated by shame?" And I said, well, I would say it's all fear. Even shame is fear, right?
Yes.
So it's all fear, but I would say women are wired for safety, not fear, right? It's safety. And I don't know if men are motivated by shame, but I know I can motivate a man with shame.
Yes.
But it's
So,
all fear, right?
Yeah. You know what I say, it's all about the basics of survival and maintaining the species.
Right. Yes.
So a woman is designed to take on a bigger responsibility in maintaining the species. You know, and I always say, you know, a woman's commitment to having a child and making that child survive starts with even choosing a mate. But a man's commitment is different. It's not a nurturing commitment. It's kind of like, if I sow enough seeds, there'll be a few that turn out okay and survive. You know, whereas a woman has a commitment to the life of her child forever. So yeah, it's a basic survival instinct that works more on women than men.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to know, is there anything that I have not asked you that you feel is really important for this conversation?
I think we've covered it. I you know, there's always things that you think about, and I like to say that the big thing from a risk reduction challenge is identifying the hazards and reporting them, putting a flag on those mines, so others don't step on them. So that's it. Sharing the information, sharing. We're not at war with each other. Secrets are for war, and safety is about uncovering the enemy.
Right.
Which
That's
is,
and it's the enemy within.
yeah,
Right?
which is the hazards that we live among.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. If people want to buy your book, can they get it?
Well, they can direct message me. My email is billyearwood@telus.net, and I can ship them a copy and we can arrange payment. I just realized that being an author is a bookkeeper and a shipper.
Right. Yeah. And it won't come like this, but
No.
you know, I'm happy to provide that system to anybody.
I've shamelessly put a copy up behind me on that.
Oh, I like it. No, I love it. That was great.
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me to join you in this, and we can talk anytime.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciated your time today.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.